What if I told you something as simple as a loud noise or a sudden fright could create a lifelong trauma for a fetus or an infant? Imagine a baby in the womb feeling the shock of its mother jumping in sudden fright at a scene in a horror movie, or an infant or a fetus experiencing its first exposure to a toxic substance. These seemingly insignificant events can create memories that shape how the brain reacts to the world for the rest of their lives. In this video, we'll explore how these early traumas form, why the brain creates triggers for them, and how social interaction itself can become a source of avoidance. A fetus doesn't exist in isolation. It feels what the mother feels. Her emotions, her stress levels, even how she reacts to the world impacts the developing baby. If a mother gets a fright while watching a horror movie, the fetus feels the rush of adrenaline as though it were its own. What may seem inconsequential to an adult can seem catastrophic to a fetus who doesn't have context for what is happening. A fetus or infant system is so sensitive that exposure to something like a loud noise, strong smell, or toxic substance, either introduced to the fetus through the mother or directly to the infant, can shock the system. And this shock is enough for the brain to create a memory that it ties to survival. The brain says, something about this experience was dangerous, so I need to remember it so that I can protect myself in the future. But here's the thing, we have no conscious control over what the brain designates as triggers for those memories. And this is where what I call global and localized triggers come into the story. When the brain forms a memory of an event, it stores all the sensory information it was receiving at the time, as well as the emotion being felt. Now, any part of that sensory information, sight, sound, smell, touch, or taste, can become a trigger for that memory if encountered in the outer world. Now, when you encounter a trigger and that original memory is triggered, you re-experience the emotion that was contained in that original memory. So with a localized trigger, for example, if a person has a traumatic memory of a spider, whenever they see a spider, that original memory is activated and they re-experience the emotion that was stored within it. These triggers are localized because a spider is something that you don't encounter everywhere all day. Depending upon your environment, you may not see a spider for weeks, months, or even years. In the case of global triggers, the brain generalizes the threat to a broader category of experiences. And agoraphobia is a perfect example of this. If a person has a traumatic memory involving a crowded space at a specific location, their brain might not just designate that specific location as dangerous. It might broaden that fear so that it covers all public spaces. And this can lead the person to avoid leaving home altogether in case they encounter a crowded public space. Now imagine if a traumatic memory is linked to social interaction or aspects of it, such as certain facial expressions or tones of voice or even eye contact. This means that social interaction becomes a trigger for that traumatic memory. And whenever that memory is triggered, the person re-experiences that traumatic emotion contained within the memory. This means that the brain, in an effort to protect itself, can designate all of social interaction as something to be avoided. And this can make normal social learning feel overwhelming or even impossible. Effectively, access to the socialization process becomes partially or completely blocked. When socialization becomes a trigger, it creates a vicious cycle. Avoiding social interactions means missing out on opportunities to learn critical skills, like reading facial expressions, interpreting voice tonality, and effectively expressing emotions. Over time, this avoidance compounds, leading to greater struggles in social communication and interactions. The good news is that the brain's ability to create traumatic memories also means that it has the power to uncreate them. When we address the negative emotions stored within these memories, it helps the brain to dissolve the triggers. When we release that emotional charge, the brain no longer sees socialization as something dangerous. and this means that the door to social learning reopens, creating a space for growth and connection at any age. Trauma can happen as early as in the womb, and even though our brain's protective mechanisms have meant that we have created coping and avoidance behaviours that have shaped our life up until now, they don't have to define our entire lifetime. By understanding how triggers work and healing the emotions that are linked to them, we can help autistic individuals and others who struggle with social interactions to reconnect with the world. My next video will be the first in the series of 9 that explains how trauma accounts for practically all of the challenges that autistic people face. The first video is an overview of the 7 categories of challenges that people on the spectrum experience. And then in the next 7 videos, I'll go specifically into each category and explain how trauma accounts for each one of those challenges in that category. And then in the final video, I'll bring it all together and explain how clearing the negative emotions from all your negative memories can help you to drastically reduce, and in many instances, completely eliminate practically all of the challenges that you face. So if you haven't done so already, follow this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the videos in this series, because believe me, the information they contain can change everything for you. If you want to dive deeper into how trauma underpins autism, then I'll put a link in the description below to one of my blog posts, Unraveling the Autism and PTSD Overlap. And if you find you want to understand even more about how trauma shapes autism, then you can't really go wrong with this video up here.